I'm the head of the emerging business team here in North America for Ericsson. I'm going to just spend a couple minutes talking about who Ericsson is, because y'all came in here today, but maybe you don't know much about us. We're a little hidden secret in the telecoms world. For those of you who've been in the telecoms world, you definitely know us. We're about a 140-year-old company based in Sweden. And we power about 50% of the world's mobile traffic. So all of that calling home or creating new business models is probably in somewhere in the world powered by Ericsson. This is the Santa Clara presence for Ericsson. So we're doing a lot of the traditional things that big companies in Silicon Valley would be doing, and some non-traditional things that we'll talk about. This topic is super important to me personally, so as we thought about what I'm going to share with you that we're doing here tonight, I thought about sort of how we wanted to start a new conversation with Ericsson and the Connected Intelligence Studio that we're launching. And for me, when I think about how I want to devote the hours in my day and the impact that I want to have in the world, it's about creating a more sustainable and brighter future for my children and the generations beyond. And I'm a big believer that large companies in partnership with NGOs and startups, which is probably everyone in the room here, we have a unique capability and responsibility to tackle these things head on. So we have a distinguished panel, which I'll let you guys introduce, but I also wanted to say a couple things about the unique opportunities of these particular technologies. Ericsson is a leader in 5G. You've probably been following the news if this is your cup of tea about all of the announcements that have been coming on. There's definitely a 5G race, and Ericsson is full in it. And we've been making announcements with most of the major telcos here in the US and abroad. And we have a strong partnership with AT&T in that space, so you can hear more about that. But 5G, as you'll hear, is going to be unlocking a lot of new opportunities to power sustainable solutions, particularly in combination with the industrial internet, or IoT, the Internet of Things. And this unique combination will create new businesses, new business models, and drive new solutions that will make the world a better and brighter place. That being said, it's not easy. Or at least it hasn't historically been easy. And so one of our hypotheses is that Ericsson, we believe, can be a convener in bringing together an ecosystem to tackle the usability and the new business model creation that will unlock these things that will create a brighter future. And so that's the panel that we have here today. So with that, I'll let you guys introduce the fantastic panel that we have. Thank you.
Thanks, Shannon. Great. Well, welcome everyone, and we're really happy that you were able to join us today. So I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Bhushan Joshi. I'm based in Plano, Texas, in the Ericsson office. I lead Ericsson's sustainability program for US and Canada. And really this topic of climate change is something that Ericsson is a world leader on. You know, climate change is a real thing. It's happening. We have a limited amount of time to do something about it. And Ericsson, as I said, is a world leader on corporate climate action, and we're focused on developing and identifying opportunities which can enable other sectors to take exponential climate action. So last year there was a exponential climate action roadmap report that was released here in San Francisco that talked about what does each sector need to do in order to decarbonize by 50% by 2030, which is where we will need to be to meet the goals of the Paris Climate Accord. The same report also outlines that there is a big role for digital technology. Digital technology can enable up to 15% reduction in carbon emissions globally by enabling other sectors to be more resource efficient. So really, with the amount of devices, the latest Ericsson Mobility report says 2.1 billion cellular devices by 2024. So we'll have sensors in factories, we'll have sensors on farms, in our cities, in our homes. So we'll have all of this technology that can finally enable us to develop societies that are more sustainable, more efficient. So really what we're trying to do is address this question, right? What can 5G and IoT do to enable us to develop a more sustainable and brighter future for everyone? And so to answer that question, we have assembled a great panel here today. And please join me in welcoming our panelists. So we'll kind of kick off by having each one of you introduce yourself. So Rob, if you want to go first, quick introduction, and maybe you could share some key insight you have about the question that we asked around 5G IoT and how can it enable sustainable development.
God, that could take all night. Wow.
We got about 1 minute.
1 minute? Okay. So Rob Tiffany, I work for Shannon. I'm the VP of IoT for North America. I'm leading this new connected intelligence studio that's based right here. So we're building this. This is a lot of fun. Been in the IoT space for a long time, with Hitachi and Microsoft. And I am super passionate about how IoT can be applied to sustainability and environmental issues. I even built my own system just for that. I mean, I think we should be doing whatever we can. And I won't steal any of your thunder of some of the stuff we'll talk about, but I think we're at an inflection point. We've had this perfect storm economically where we can do things that we couldn't do before. Technologically, things are getting democratized around IoT and sensors. And it's time for us to put it all together and make the best use of it to help society and help the world.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Rob. Jason, you want to go next?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jason Morrison. I'm the president of the Pacific Institute. It's a nonprofit sustainability think tank focused on water. We're based in Oakland. And for us, the way I would set the stage for the water and sustainability and 5G IoT conversation is that we're coming out of an era of relative abundance on a resource that now is getting increasingly scarce. Projection is that by 2040, 2/3 of the world's population will live in water-stressed areas. And what that necessitates, or what it means, is there's an increased interest in better managing the resource and measuring use, reusing it, improving quality, and all of that is a need to better be able to evaluate in real time what's happening. I think there's a lot of opportunity around technology that can help water resource managers do that.
Great. Thank you. Beverly, you want to go next?
Yeah, Beverly Ryder, and I'm the Chief Commercial Officer for Hitachi, where Rob recently came from. I also have been at Ericsson, so I think Rob and I are like switching roles. We're switching around.
Just a little
We'll see
flip-flop.
what happens next. So I'm a huge believer in sustainability, and it's kind of funny actually that I'm here because growing up, my mom took us to see about every red rock in the entire world. And she so believed in sustainability that I swore there was no way I was ever going to be involved in anything to do with water conservation, land conservation, the getting your food right down the road, like anything like that was not going to be for me. And somehow embedded in me is this need to do better for the world. And I have this just funny story to share is that I was just in Thailand and for work. It was a total thing where I was going to go to the hotel and then leave and go back to the airplane and not see anything. I had the opportunity to be out with the elephants for one day. It was my birthday, so I could either get on an airplane or spend the day with the elephants, so I took elephants. And they were using IoT technology in order to make a better place for these elephants that had been rescued from all over the world. And they were using it to do their crops and to harvest correctly and to use less water and to really change the temperature of how people thought about sustainability in Thailand. And that made me think I'm not doing enough and that we can all be doing more every single day. And so that's one of the reasons I accepted Shannon's request to come today is just I want to do my part, and anything that I can do as part of the conversation, I want to add.
Great. That was great. Tim, you want to go next?
Hi, hello everyone. I'm Tim Fleming with AT&T. I'm the Global Director of Enterprise Sustainability. I'm on our Corporate Social Responsibility team. And really excited to be part of this conversation because I think Rob has it right. We're at the inflection point. If you think back to 1991, right before on the cusp of the World Wide Web, you think of 2007, the cusp of the iPhone and the smartphone, and think about how that has changed, those transformative times. You can go back to when we started laying tracks. But my whole mission in life is around how can we leverage technology for good, both socially, environmentally, and get these outcomes. And 5G is such I'm getting that reverb. 5G is such an important part because we're going to get to really put fourth industrial revolution technologies on steroids. And really start attacking all of the SDGs. It's kind of futuristic, but I think we're here, and I think that we're at that inflection point in a transformational time, so I'm really happy to be part of the conversation.
Great, appreciate it. Said?
From a small telecom company, AT&T, yeah? Great.
It's going to be a long day.
My name is Saeed Amidi. I'm the founder of Plug and Play. And lately, we built innovation platforms. We call it open innovation in mobility, in IoT, in supply chain and logistics, in insurance, banking. We quite frankly feel this digital transformation is going at the speed of light, and we help large companies like ExxonMobil, like Mercedes, to sort of do this digital transformation with the help of entrepreneurs and startups. And like your elephant story, my daughter Sophie told me, Saeed, you're not doing anything in sustainability. And so now I have decided to spend 20% of my time and 20% of our investments in sustainability. And we feel like with our IoT division, mobility division, smart city division, and of course insurance, we feel we can have a big impact in this sustainability journey. And like you said, Tim, I feel the 5G and IoT will connect so many things that similar to this phone that changed my life, I feel we could use this inflection point to make a big difference in the environment, water, and the rest of sustainability, and I'm glad to be here.
Great. So, we talked about inflection point many times, right? So my question is, to everyone again, is that yes, we are at that inflection point, but there's still some challenges, right? So from your perspective, what are some of those biggest challenges that you're seeing that are stopping us from taking exponential action in deploying 5G IoT technologies? I would love to hear, how do we overcome those challenges? So we'll start with Rob, you again.
Okay.
So we're
Maybe everybody should drink when we say inflection point now.
Yeah.
Yeah, that does seem like a new drinking game. Everybody take a shot.
Alcohol.
Yeah. All right, absolutely. It's weird. It's almost paradoxical to say, yes, we're at this inflection point where, it sounds cheesy to say, oh, it's the democratization of blah, blah, blah. Sensors got cheap enough, ubiquitous wireless for the most part. Technologies that used to be horribly expensive, like analytics, now I can go to apache.org and just download them for free. There's so many things that made it level the playing field for everybody so that we could all tackle these problems. But what's holding us back? There's still a few things. Security is one thing that's a big, paranoid, because when you're building IoT, you're also creating the largest attack surface in the history of computing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So don't let that freak you out or anything. But it's a thing. It's real. Also, I think I think people overthink stuff a lot, and especially around IoT. So as simple as things have gotten, there's lots of people who love to show off how smart they are with each other, and so they're always making sure you have to use the most esoteric technologies to make this work. And so a lot of people are afraid. They go, wow, I don't have what it takes to do IoT. The stack is so complicated. I think it's total baloney. I think we've got the easy technologies all around us that can enable us to, because sometimes good enough is good enough. And when we need to tackle these hard problems, we shouldn't let using the very best hold us back. If good enough will get us there.
Use the right level of technology for the right level of application.
Absolutely.
Or use case.
Yeah, the stuff we need's out there and everybody knows it.
Right.
You just gotta be willing to go for it.
Great.
Yeah.
So, Jason, from your standpoint, you come from the NGO, non-governmental space. In the stakeholders that you work with, what sort of challenges are you hearing from people who are members of the CE Water mandate in terms of what needs to happen for better water management solutions?
Yeah. So as a sustainability NGO and someone who spends 100% of my time in sustainability space, So, and when we were talking before, I joked, only 20%? Come on, that's about 50%. I'm the NGO, I should be advocating, right? Let me start with the promise and then the peril. So with water, the good thing is when it becomes more scarce, everyone values it more and they're willing to invest more in it, right? So we work a lot with the business community and has done so through a partnership with the UN Global Compact. There was a reference to the Sustainable Development Goals. The UN has a 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. One of the goals is on water. And quite a few of the leading companies now are thinking about what are their strategies and programs and goals as they relate to this global goal on water. That's a leading position. But many of the companies have come at water even before that from a position of risk. If you're a food company or a beverage company and 95% of your water use is in your supply chain, agricultural supply chain, you don't need to be told about climate change being real, and you don't need to be told about water risk because you're living that in your company. So many that have come at it from the risk lens for a long time now. What's been interesting and refreshing about the technology sector is that there's certainly, if you got big data centers and water's an issue, then there's a risk side of it, and operational management is important. But also the idea of bringing solutions to some of the challenges is motivating quite a few new players, and the partnership that we have with Ericsson is in that spirit. And so there's a lot of promise about applying IoT to better manage water. And I could go through a long list of where it's already in the pilot phase and having use cases. But I also want to talk a little bit about the sobering barriers that you asked about with water, because you guys are dealing with technology and technology advancement all the time. There's a lot of socio-political factors that hamper uptake and adoption of great technologies. And for water, it is a crazy socio-political dimension of water resource management that makes it very hard sometimes to innovate and take up technology. So let me just give one example of that. It was pretty abstract. So there's a pilot that IBM is doing right now in the Central Valley with farmers to use IoT and blockchain to better monitor groundwater withdrawals on farm, to be able to lay the platform eventually for being able to market water based on some farmers deciding to fallow, others that need more water that year, and having a good market that would allow that water transfer to happen. But the reality is there are a lot of vested interests, whether it be California or otherwise, that are perfectly happy with nobody really knowing how much water is being used. So the theory of blockchain allowing for a good common accounting system that everyone agrees to is great in theory, unless you're part of the vested interest that quite likes not having that information out there. And that's just one example. And I'm certainly not trying to pick on the California farmer. I could replicate that story in many places around the world. So you got great technology promise and opportunity, but a lot of socio-political factors you're going to need to overcome in order to finally get there. And that's why partnership between public-private is going to be an important part of this, and I can speak to that more later if there's time.
Okay. No, I'm going to pick up on the thread of partnership with what you said. So Beverly, kind of bringing this question to you now in terms of more of an ecosystem approach to IoT. Can you talk a little bit about how do core competencies of others who are part of like an ecosystem approach that you would take to IoT, how do they complement each other?
Yeah, I think that it's kind of a combined answer to both questions, and that is that I think it's very geographically based, right? So in the different regions across the world, this answer would be different.
Right.
I don't believe that there's actually one answer, and I also don't think that there's one true ecosystem. It's about, first of all, finding people that want to work together. Right now in this industry, IoT is the buzzword, or digital transformation, or social innovation, but it's really a complexity that's being added on top. You know, Shannon and I talk all the time that the easiest solution may not need 5G. It might only need 2G actually, but we're not looking for what we can offer today. We're kind of looking into the future rather than saying, okay, what can we do today, and then what's the possibility for tomorrow? So I think that that's the biggest overarching issue. And then looking at the ecosystem, I mean, I've been fortunate to work with almost everybody on the panel, and probably about half of the audience as well. So I've been really lucky. It probably means I've been in this business a little bit too long. But I think that we all want to do the right things. It's our ideas of what the right thing is, right? And we all have differing viewpoints, differing starting points. And so we have to start from that common objective and work backwards, right? If we start with that common objective as an ecosystem, then we fill in the players. And then the complexity of the ecosystem is as complex as we want to make it, right? There's jockeying for who's in front, there's jockeying for what do the revenues look like, or what does the profitability look like in a deal, or what does the contracting process look like to get something done, where there's simplistic ways to do that, right? In the old days, we had one piece of paper, we had one cell, it had A through Z, and once you got to Z, you didn't put any more on that paper. Like, it was done. So I think that if we could simplify as the solutions become more commoditized, that creates more of the ecosystem. And I also think that from this perspective, like, I'm really lucky to have AT&T on this side of me because they're one of my favorite telcos, and I know that you're going to ask me a question later about another telco, so don't take that personal, please.
Not at all.
But it takes a equipment and innovative provider, somebody like Ericsson, working with an AT&T to then put our solutions on top of that to really make that change and to be able to find those sustainable solutions, whether it be in energy. You know, when I look at the manufacturing line, and there's plenty of them here, maybe it's for tomatoes, or maybe it's for Nike shoes, or maybe it's for something else, you know, you could use 100 gallons of water and 40% of your energy consumption in your factory to make that one item. And if you can reduce each of that by 20%, you know, that changes the world, right? So we need the customer, and we need at least 3 of us on this panel, and then we need all the niche players in order to give that customer an easy turnkey solution.
Easy turnkey solution. Yeah, and it's interesting, you know, I'm going to Tim now and talking about, you know, the goal that AT&T has established around 10x, you know, doing 10 times better than your own carbon footprint. And when I saw that goal, you know, and it's an award-winning goal, right? You were recognized for that goal. And I kind of wanted to know, like, what were some of the drivers that AT&T looked into in establishing that goal? Because it's about doing more with what you have, right?
Absolutely, and it kind of comes in the form of a net positive. You may have heard that term before, where you're going to have some form of a footprint, but what are you really doing on the business side, the product side, to drive reduction, carbon reduction, or resource reduction for your customers? And so just to state what the goal is, AT&T has a goal to enable carbon savings 10 times our own footprint by the year 2025. And what I like about the goal is it forces you to attack the problem from both sides. It's not just an operational goal, we have to reduce our footprint. It's also driving the business. Now, we're very lucky we have guys like Chris Penrose and Mike Zito, who had our president of Internet of Things and our Smart Cities team. They're all in anyway. They were ahead of us on this stuff. So we talk to them about the goal, and they're like, yeah, we're all in, let's go for it. But how did we come up with those numbers? We were part of an organization called the Global E-Sustainability Initiative. They're known as GESI. And actually, Ericsson is a strong contributor to this work. We worked on this together. They published a Smarter 2030 report, and the research demonstrated that ICT as a sector can enable carbon savings. It's 20% global GHG reduction. That translates to 9.7 times a sector footprint versus other industries. So we just took that, rounded up to 10, and knocked off 5 years. So that's where we came up with it.
It was scientific.
Yeah, very nice. But for us, I'll be honest with you, we have been very conservative with our goals. If you track us, you know, we're very kind of like, are we going to hit it? Great, let's set a goal. It was our first, what we would call a North Star goal. So we're very happy to have that one.
And you know, so kind of taking that about, you know, taking that thread from you and you know, kind of understanding that there's better outcomes, doing the right thing in what we need to drive, you know, with investment, right? So we look at rise of ESG, environmental social governance, investment bank, you know, companies are looking at these metrics when they drive their financial decision making and investing. What about the incubator and the innovator and the sector that you work in, say, are you starting to consider ESG metrics in driving your investment decisions? 20%, but
yeah, you know, if I can say, you know, before coming here, I tried to find the best sustainability investments in the world that had great return. I think this topic was really hot about 10 years ago. There was a lot of money went into it. And we do not have a Uber or Airbnb that we say there was like this much money spent and now Uber is worth 70 billion. The closest thing I could come to was Tesla. And I believe like Tesla for automotive industry was a wake-up call that got everybody going toward a more sustainable car. So in plug and play, and I will come to the investment side, we try to create an innovation platform, like as part of our IoT, smart city and mobility. We have 100 of the largest corporations in the world, including BP, ExxonMobil, Ford, etc. So we create an environment that if entrepreneur like Larry or Sergey or someone much smarter than me has an idea how to make the world a more cleaner place, use less energy, carbon may it be, or even electricity, we enable them with seed funding and A round funding with our 200 VC partners to realize their dream. And we feel like if you create an ecosystem or innovation platform where you fund companies, increase their chances of success by working with someone like Ericsson. We work with Merck's, the biggest shipping company in the world. And if you can, instead of them trying to work with you guys for 4 years and not getting anywhere, if we can reduce that to 3 to 6 months, that is the impact we are looking for.
That's great.
And we've been able to do this about 1,000 times last year. So we helped about 1,000 startups, hopefully positively realize their dreams. And we hope to apply the same thing as we have learned in other industry to this sustainable and, quite frankly, social impact.
Right.
We want to make money at it. That's the main important ingredients.
Yeah. No, it's the triple bottom line approach, right? So I'll kind of ask you another question. So what sort of, like you talked about, kind of taking companies early stage and kind of giving them the guide. What sort of technologies are you seeing? What sort of innovations are you seeing that are focused on energy efficiency, resource efficiency, sustainable development? Could you give us a few examples?
In sustainability area, we started a program in Amsterdam called Fashion for Good. So specifically, believe it or not, fashion is the second biggest polluter in the world. Like every shirt uses, 40 liters of water to grow the cotton, color it, etc. So now in Fashion for Good, we have Adidas, we have CNA, we have Target, Walmart, everybody working toward how to make the fabric from the start more sustainable, and specifically after life, how do you recycle the fabric and reuse it? Specifically about 10 days ago, I invested in an algae company that claims you could make fabric out of algae, and it's 100% degradable. And it sounds cool, I'm wearing algae. So
Right now?
No, I will show you the sample. It's not wearable yet. But nevertheless, I think, if this technology work, you could scale it. So we believe something that it's really scalable that can turn to be $1 billion business. If it's not $1 billion business, I do not invest.
Wow.
So at least I have to, fool myself. This is going to be $1 billion. But the whole idea is, again, we have done a couple of battery technologies, because no matter how the solar and wind, it's growing incredibly fast, but we do need a better battery technology to make it more usable at all times everywhere. So we are hopefully this time around, like I think the mobile phone story was very big sort of 15, 20 years ago, but about 7 years ago, Apple and then Android made it mainstream. So we hope this time around the sustainability will be mainstream, will be here forever. And if companies like ExxonMobil and BP are saying we're going to spend billions of dollars doing it, I think it's going to happen, and I'm betting on it.
Great. So again, I'll Tim, with the 10x goal that you've established, can you tell us some of the projects that AT&T is working on that are driving you towards achieving that goal?
Yeah, sure. Inflection point? No? They're not playing. They're not playing. Okay. Yeah, so we had this goal, and of course, then you say you have this goal, I'm going to do that, I got to quantify it. So we didn't have a methodology. So we worked with Carbon Trust and some other NGOs to develop a very,
It's a few pages, right? The methodology.
it's peer reviewed. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
I think it's credible. Anyway, so we did that, but then so let's go work with some customers and let's go out in the field and let's actually get some numbers. Because you hear these use cases and these anecdotes. Oh, the technology saves water. Okay, cool. Let's move on. No, wait. How much water is it saving? What's the turn back? So one of the more interesting ones, I think, and is we're attacking. It's a greenhouse gas goal, but we attack a water problem. And I'm going to be careful because Jason's going to correct me if I get any of these numbers wrong. But one example is, I was shocked to learn this, is around rice farming. So apparently, rice farming globally is responsible. It accounts for 40% of global irrigated water. He did not. Okay.
You want to check his stats?
I'm inviting peril here. And also, because of just the way they farm, you have 4 inches of water all the time. You create an anaerobic situation. That generates 1.5% of greenhouse gas emissions because of the methane that comes out, the bubbles up from these rice. So that's huge. And there's a process of doing, it's called alternate wetting and drying. So you can actually drain the field, flood the field, drain the field. Really hard to do manually. And how do you get it at the right time? And the conditions have to be right. Technology enables you to do this, IoT technology. So we work with a company called Precision King. And you put sensors in the rice field, and it it monitors the field near real time, and it tells you when the conditions are right to actually drain it and control the levels of water where they need to be. So it's all automated. You have the pumps on IoT connections, and so if this were adopted globally, it would be millions of metric tons of GHG. Now, the one example we have, the farmer we're working with Precision King, he reduces his water usage by 60%. And he reduces pump energy by 30%. Both of those translate into greenhouse gas reductions.
Great.
Yeah, and one more example I want to give you because Beverly's here. Because funding and financing all of this is a hard problem for both enterprises and cities, right? AT&T had a problem. The facilities managers, they don't get budget. They just get budget cuts. That's all they get. So they're like, oh yeah, let's put in LEDs. Oh yeah, let's put sensors. Let's go. Nobody has any money for that. And they put all that on the facilities guys, right? We worked, I don't know how many years ago it was, Beverly, but we worked with Hitachi and a company called Enlighted actually to come up with a very creative way of paying for things where you buy the savings. You don't actually pay for anything. And it's not an ESCO. You just pay for savings. You never technically really own the equipment. You don't own the OpEx. But the barrier is before, a guy comes in with a spreadsheet or comes in and says, I want to sell you this chiller or this device or this intervention, and it's going to save you X amount of energy. There's no way to verify that unless you sub-meter everything. And nobody was going to do that. So you have an energy bill for the building. You're like, I don't know. It went down. It didn't go down. I don't know. I don't know if I saved money or not. But now with IoT, you start connecting at the device level or even at the circuit level behind the board. You can now monitor how much energy you're using real time. And so you can monitor the savings. And then I can just buy the savings. And so we're doing this in our own operations, and we attribute, I think, 800,000 metric tons of reduction. I mean, we use a lot of energy, right? And so there's another one where the commercial buildings, just real quick, the other data point I'll give you is commercial buildings in the U.S. are responsible for 19% of energy usage. And half of that's for lighting and cooling, which is a perfect target for this type of solution.
Right,
yeah.
right. And Beverly, kind of coming to you, Tim was talking about helping farmers drain their fields better with, so I'm thinking like, how does usability come into this technology, right? With like IoT, like how do you make this more usable to a broader range of people who are maybe not engineers? Do you have any thoughts on that?
From getting people to use technologies.
Yeah.
I think you have to be able to show them the outcome. It's all about the business outcome. A lot of times we start with the technology instead of the problem. So the problem is that I spend X dollars, and how do I cut that cost, right? That's the one that's easiest for everybody to adopt, is cost savings. Productivity is second. If you can create additional productivity using these technologies, people love that as well. The harder ones are those intangible benefits, like our kids will have water to drink. Right. Like for some reason people can't grasp that there's a value there.
The value, yeah.
Right. And I could use energy too. But so I think it's really about presenting it in a way that the different cultures that you're around can understand and can easily adopt. So the adoptability is really about simplicity of messaging. It's about being able to show it in maybe 3 different ways. One where you hear it and you understand it. One where you see it and you can imagine yourself doing it. And then lastly, where you feel it. One of the things we forget about technology is that it's human. There's such a human element to adoption. And I'll tell you about a non-successful opportunity, because I think it's as important as the successful things, is we actually installed something not where I'm at today, but when I had my own company, and it was a massive saver in sustainability. They would have saved about 60% a year in this particular category, and it would save about $265,000 a month. So any company would want to implement this. Well, it turned out that the woman who had the job today, who had to actually implement the new policy, didn't like to walk to the loading dock. And it was 2 floors away. She'd been doing the job for 30 years, and nobody thought about talking to the stakeholder that was primarily implementing the technology. So for a year, she did nothing. And at the end of the year, we go back and we want to celebrate our results and show how much money and do an enterprise-wide implementation in all their other facilities. And they had not saved $1, nor had they reached their sustainability goal that we promised. And the reason for that is there wasn't a 365 look at how did you implement it, who's going to be involved, and really the human element. And I think that that's actually the most important thing of everything we're talking about, right? We as humans are used to what we're used to, and we have to change. We have to be all in, and that's by somehow pulling at our emotions while also showing us the business outcome.
Great. That's insightful. I wanted to go to Jason. You were talking about, the kind of the ecosystem that you work in with the different stakeholders and governments and such. And taking what Beverly, you were saying, how have you been able to kind of influence people to show them some of those non-tangible things that are farther out there? Like the value of water and how important is it to have water? Can you share some examples in your engagements with that type of stakeholder group?
Yeah. So I want to go back to your point about the rice farmer and try to compare it. So if you're in Napa Valley and you're a wine producer, putting in soil moisture, doing satellite remote sensing for moisture content, chlorophyll counts on your monitoring on your plants to see when they're stressed and when you need to water, there's an ROI on that you can justify and you can do it. Most of the world, agriculture is rain-fed. It's not even irrigated. And then the step to where they're going to automate using IoT to really know how much water to put on the field is a long way away in sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia. But to answer your question, the reason that we have tried to find innovative solutions that bring together companies and governments, UN agencies, development agencies typically, and NGOs that are trying to have sustainable water management as the outcome, is that's probably where the lasting solutions will reside to the problem. So if you're in India, one of the problems with rice farming in India is a long historic economic development policy of the government to have free groundwater pumping. The energy cost of groundwater pumping is free. It's 100% subsidized. So the imperative or the need to be monitoring how much water you're applying or even caring how much of it is evaporating without actually being taken up by the roots of the rice is just not there. There's no policy, the enabling policy environment is not providing the right incentive for uptake of the technology. So it's just one example, but it's where you realize that great technologies that don't have the enabling conditions that typically for water, a highly regulated resource, with a lot of the economic triggers, the pushes and the pulls, either don't do it or do it, comes from that regulatory push. Companies that get burned by a drought get really sensitive about monitoring a resource that they've been burned by. But most haven't had such a negative experience, so there's still, water's not really on the radar yet for many companies globally. And it really is going to be hard, therefore, to get that investment in technology until they feel the imperative to do it and until it makes sense business-wise, typically through a regulatory push or pull that will make that happen.
Okay, good. So I'm going to change from water and kind of flip and talk more about food production, right? And Rob's kind of, and you know, we're talking about, you know, the exponential climate action roadmap that Ericsson worked on, and agricultural technology and forestry was one of the areas that we identified would benefit a lot by 5G IoT connectivity. Could you talk a little bit about, you know, how you could see this technology being applied both in the production of food, distribution, and maybe even, you know, what do you do after, you know, disposal and end of life? So could you talk about that a bit?
Absolutely. Now that I've had plenty of water to drink,
yeah,
we'll talk
let's
about
food now.
Yeah, why
We'll go to
not?
wine
you know?
next.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's two sides to it, kind of as you brought up. There's, you know, I mean, when I think about IoT, just like when people think about IoT in business, they think, is it going to save me money? Is it going to make me money? And with food, is it going to help me increase my crop yields because we have this insane population growth?
Right.
And also, I mean, you know, you probably read somewhere that, what is it, a third of all food is wasted or lost every year, which is, you know, it's kind of crazy. You know, you'd be amazed how we could solve a lot of our hunger issues around the world if that stuff didn't go to waste. I'll focus on that for a second. You know, so a lot of that wastage and everything happens after the harvest. You know, it's not like a problem necessarily there. It's in the supply chain. It's in, you know, how you like have a date that says this is the expiration date on whatever this product. You need to use it by this or eat it by this or whatever, or it's going to go bad. A lot of food is thrown away erroneously because it tells you it's got to be used by then. What you didn't realize is that with most foods you can use gas sensors to smell the foods, and those gases will tell you if there's bacteria or if there's spoilage. And let's just bring this on home to industrial IoT for a moment, something that everyone understands. When in IoT, a lot of times we talk about remaining useful life in equipment and manufacturing machines, instead of like you buy a car and you get an owner's manual and it says you need to change the oil every however many thousand miles and you need to do work on the water pump. That stuff is the same for everything. So with your food, you're getting something that says you got to eat it by this date or you use the milk by this date. But it's all just a guess. It's a guess based on past experiences, so maybe it's a good guess. But what if you could actually know? IoT is about knowing. It's getting out of the guessing game and it's remotely knowing. And so now all of a sudden, we've got this technology. We're talking about this inflection point. We're talking about the economics democratizing this stuff. So now we can actually know, is this food bad or not? And so we don't toss this stuff and it doesn't go to waste. And we can know better. We can have better IoT or even, gosh, is blockchain a drinking game too? Yeah, okay, all right, let's say blockchain, just because I had to anyway. But yes, tracking all that stuff. So on that side, after harvest, there's a whole lot we can do to help people from being hungry. Now on the flip side, production of food, how do we increase, you know, because I don't know, in my lifetime, it seems like the population maybe doubled or something like that while I was asleep last night. So that's kind of crazy. So we've got to produce more food. So there's, you know, you might hear about using IoT in food production or precision agriculture. And boy, that's wide ranging. That goes from autonomous tractors doing their thing to actually knowing more, using those same sensors, which got a whole lot cheaper. And with the magic of wireless, maybe you've heard about massive IoT. or something like that, where you can use kind of low-powered sensors, low-powered wireless, where the battery lasts for 10 years, and it's a very sustainable way to do things, actually, to get that data. But it can tell you, how much water do I need to put out here? How much do I need to do any fertilizer, limiting pesticides, things like that? There's so many sensors that can be applied to farming now that will make farming more sustainable, get more from less. You know, like we talk about things like drip irrigation, just going to that next level. We're not guessing anymore, we know. And so we reduce all the bad stuff that creates runoff with fertilizer and pesticides. And so you get just what you needed, and then you find ways to get more. I mean, I think that's one of our big holy grails, is to get more yield per square acre of farmland. And so we're absolutely going to use IoT, but I think it also goes hand in hand with the water thing too. I mean, you don't have agriculture growing food without the water equation as well. And so we can't just throw that under the bus at all. That's a lot of work with a lot of folks all together, but I think it's more doable now than ever before.
Great, great. And I'm just wondering, maybe we should ask the audience if they have any questions too. Anyone here? Any questions?
Just one in the back.
We have one in the far back.
Up top.
Oh, yeah.
Let me see if we can run a mic up to you. Hold on one second. You had to be all the way in the back.
So I'm Henry. Thank you very much for the panel. Particularly thank you to Plug and Play. I was just there this afternoon. So one of my a startup that I work with just got accepted. So it was very good. They happened to be in the IoT, smart device, and the monitoring field. So talking about the food, so do you guys know how much food is wasted a year in US?
40%.
60 million tons, $160 billion of food is being wasted. So I think the technology, in my view, technology has existed, but one of the biggest challenge to me in helping those startups is I find this is one of the toughest industry to get the customer to adopt to the technology. And the reason is you're dealing with some of the most traditional industry and manufacturing, farming and all that. And it's not like when you're developing an app like Uber and then, user can just download it and use it. This requires a lot of, convincing because they're just not into it, not into technology. So my question is, what is the big company like, Ericsson and all that can really help? I think, Plug and Play is doing excellent job, bringing together all the ecosystem. But I think we need some championing from, the big company to really, put the foot forward. Like IBM is doing a great job in blockchain, the adoptions and all that. But what can big company do to help smaller company startup when we go talk to the customer and then make sure that they can do that? Thank you. Yeah.
May I take a crack at this?
Yeah, please.
First we worked with Ericsson about sort of following, I believe, the banana out of South America inside the container all the way to the shop. But we kind of lose it at the shop. We didn't know what happens at the home after the consumer buys it. But let me kind of use an example. Last week I was in Northwest Arkansas with Tyson Food, one of the largest food companies in America. And we have over 20 pilots with Tyson to stop or reduce wastage in food. One of them is a company out of Berkeley called ChemiSense that, as you said, with the size of a little Band-Aid, measures the air quality of any package, may it be chicken or beef or pork, and it would tell you exactly what is the quality of the meat. And quite frankly, we feel we work a little bit with ConAgra, we work with PepsiCo Food Division. I believe they are really had a wake-up call, and they are now really interested to packaging food better, saving food from the dirt to the plants. So at least we work with a lot of them. But as you said, we need more aggressive collaboration between the big corporations and the startup. And I will not forgive myself if I don't recognize Beverly, the only lady on our panel who talked about emotions and feeling. And I think the new generation, my 20-year-old Sophie, to her, sustainability is the most important issue in life. And other than they're gonna make us do it, like spend more time on sustainability and environment and social impact, we should enjoy doing it. And I really recognize you to bring it up, because we would talk only about business the whole time. Thank you.
I'm going to hijack this because
Yeah,
I have
please.
the mic and that's my prerogative at this point. But I want to go back because it's an important question. I'm going to tie together a couple different threads. So the Connected Intelligence Studio that Rob is leading is geared specifically at the question of how do we bring together the ecosystem. And by the ecosystem, the point that you were making about the usability and getting the humans in the room to make sure that we're not creating technology for technology's sake, but that we're addressing real business problems, because we need to create sustainable business models that these aren't just like, continuous investment cycles, but bringing the users into the room. And so that's what the Connected Intelligence Studio is doing, is bringing together service providers and industrials and nonprofits and startups potentially, and the end users who are going to have to deal with the everyday usability so that we can get the massive adoption. So I just wanted to be able to connect those dots, because that's why we're here today.
Nice plug.
Great.
Thanks.
Yeah,
I like
nice.
that.
Question?
Hey, I want to pick a little bit of all of what you said, actually, and it's more like a open question, piggyback a little bit on what you said, Bob, saying at one point you need to use technology until it's working and not going above it. And it's more a question for Jason, saying, don't you think that it's more like using technology, but in a collaboration with actually more ancient, the way we did culture before? And I'm thinking, for example, I'm coming from an area where we just destroy all the hedge, I think, in between the fields, just to make the fields bigger so that, tractor can just harass more of the culture. And it's just like an in-between of putting back some edge and also using maybe IoT to do more permaculture, saying, well, in between these two cultures, you need to have more, I don't know, this kind of sort of tomato, because it will bring actually exactly what you need to grow these beans or whatever.
I hope I understood the question correctly.
It's about hedges.
Yeah, and about
And
the
fields.
economic pressures. So what I think has been one of the more impressive transformations that in my career as an environmental professional over the last 20 plus years, 28 years, is the evolution of business from environment being a philanthropy to a CSR that was kind of peripheral to internal business value, to companies that are now thinking, the Paul Pullmans that come to the Climate Action Summit, I don't know if you heard him, he sounded like an NGO. He said basically global companies need to be part of the social solution. If you can't track back how your company is solving a problem for society, you probably don't have a reason to be. And that's something an NGO would say. But it's like the getting real that companies have got. So where it used to be the externalities, the environmental externalities were what you would, if you could reduce production costs or supply chain costs and drive that down by maximizing yield out of a field, but in doing so have so diminished the quality of the soil that the yields for the next year are going down. The windbreaks are gone so that there's erosion in the streams or the sedimentation that comes into streams, which is then affecting downstream water users. The companies typically in the 70s and 80s didn't care. That was a cost center, and that was something they would try to offload unless there was a command and control regulatory structure that said you got to internalize the cost. Now what I think's happening is, Danone here in the US, they've been doing soil health programs for the last decade because they see it as a long-term continuity of supply. It's not like, hey, we'll go source from another region, because they're globally sourcing from everywhere, and there is no other ag region. And if you're a food company and you've looked at the map, there are some of these places that are viable for agriculture now that are not going to be viable in the 2040 climate that we're about to have. And in fact, one of these big fast-moving consumer goods has already done the regional climate modeling on places in the world where they're sourcing rain-fed agriculture that is not going to be viable in 2035, and said to that government, we need to sit down and talk, because you got to get out in front of this right now, because you're an ag export economy, and you're not going to be exporting anything. You're doing cocoa or coffee bean, and it's not going to work in Western Africa. So you need to start building your irrigation infrastructure. You need to start making the investments. And that's a company that's just basically elongated the temporal horizon to the point where there's a very strong business case to do that kind of intervention in your supply chain. And companies are getting that. So I don't know if I answered your question, but I do get the sense that this aha moment for a lot of companies, and a lot of Fortune 500 companies are starting to think this way, is now meaning that there's an investment in the sustainability dimension that's making it through the C-suite. It's not like some sustainability stooge at the lower level of the company feeling good about what we should be doing for the environment, and then the senior management saying there's no business case for this. It's actually, it's flipping now. It's at an inflection point. But you guys are all out of wine, so.
IoT is such a great ally for taking care of the environment. It's so complementary. And like I said, the costs have come down. I'm a real simple guy. I just kind of stick with the Peter Drucker thing. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. IoT is just about knowing something, sensors, or actuating something, doing. The 5G telecom, that's about taking that knowledge and remotely sending it somewhere else so we all know about it and can take action. It's real simple stuff. Let it be the ally for all our efforts in environment.
We have one more question.
Thank you. My name is Knut Valslev. I've been working the last 7 years with encryption software and security, and I'm working with a company that can take waste wood and turn it into jet fuel. So what is happening here is very encouraging. I am concerned about security. I heard what you said, and I understand the thinking behind it. Are there initiatives, for instance, by Ericsson to make security easier to implement that you are aware of or you want to work with?
Boy, that's a tough one, but yes, there is. We do have internal security stuff that we're doing. Around IoT specifically, how do you encrypt, how do you lock down those endpoints, data at rest, data in transit, all the usual stuff. Absolutely we do, and maybe to kind of make it more obvious for the rest of the folks, sometimes we don't do what we should do in security because of the hassle factor, or it's too difficult or too cumbersome. And I see that all the time. And I don't want to get too geeky here. Is it easier for me to send a token from a device to a cloud, or an X509 certificate? Well, one's a whole lot easier, so I'll go the easy route. I think in a nutshell, a lot of times that personifies what's happening in security, and so people always follow the path of least resistance. Security, as you know, is a journey. We are absolutely working on it inside Ericsson all the time. When I think about, why would you care about using cellular for IoT endpoints versus Wi-Fi or something else? Well, there's a great reason. It's a heck of a lot more secure from end to end. When you have a cellular-based IoT endpoint going over a 3GPP, standard network, your security is exponentially better than when you're doing little hops from Ethernet to Wi-Fi to this router to this whatever. So, security is critical, because if we don't get that right, we get egg in our face, and that seems to happen to everybody every day, doesn't it?
Beverly, you're going to share something?
Yeah, I was just going to say that from a security perspective, there's nobody on the panel that doesn't have a massive security infrastructure and pieces that we're looking at. I think that the hard part for IoT is that there's so many points of failure from a security perspective, right? You have your edge devices, you have your sensors, like there's so many places that somebody can piggyback into your network. And so it's really part of why an ecosystem is so important. We all have to be working together to set standards in order to make sure that we're creating an environment where all of you are protected, right? And that if we don't work together, we're never going to get there. Probably the most important thing about the ecosystem.
Yeah.
So we're at the top of the hour, so I just want to be respectful of of the people who are online, and sort of give a minute to wrap up, and then maybe for the audience we
online?
can stay for a couple more minutes. But if you just want to close out.
Overtime.
Yeah, I think so. It was really insightful, conversation with the range of stakeholders here, and there's really a sense that I got from this is that climate change is real. It's happening. There are solutions that are available that we could actually do something about this, and I feel hopeful because I feel like we're the first generation to kind of see the impacts of climate change, and probably the last that we can do something about it. So I'm really hopeful, when I hear the inputs from everyone here. So I just wanted to say I appreciate everyone's time. Thank you so much for sharing your insights. And yeah,
Thank you.
that's it.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.